Hello, and welcome to Sacred Herbalism, the full moon segment of the Elder Tree podcast, where we explore how plants can support us to enter into a sacred relationship with life and the living world. I'm Stephanie Hazel, and I've recorded this episode beneath the gaze of epic Wollumbin, where I live in Bundjalung country, and I pay my respects to the First Nations people of this land, as well as to the spirits and plants of this ancient earth. If you love what we do, you can support the Elder Tree mission of putting medicine in the hands of the people by joining our Patreon, where you can access special teachings from our presenters and our interviewees. So, let's walk into the moonlit forest together. Are you ready? Welcome to this month's Sacred Herbalism segment, where I interview Mason Taylor from Superfeast, who I've interviewed once before, about a topic that is adjacent to sacred herbalism, and that is herbal ethics. In this interview, I ask him what it means to be ethically sourcing herbs and how to be responsible as a herbal business for supporting sustainable and ethical herbal harvesting practices. We dive into some of the interesting things that the Chinese government is doing to safeguard the future herb supplies for the planet. And we also look at what it means to be an ethical practitioner and how herbal trends and these great fashions that happen in herbalism, reishi or ashwagandha or these other herbs, lion's mane, they're all popular at the moment. What does it mean for us to all jump on the bandwagon of that popularity and essentially consume more of that plant than can be sustainably grown and ethically harvested? So a few really interesting food for thought moments in this episode. We do go in lots of different directions, sometimes all at once, but bear with us, and I really would love to hear what you think about the question of ethics in herbal practice. Good morning, Mason. Welcome back to the Elder Tree. I'm really excited this episode to move away from the topic of sacred herbalism and talk about something I think is an adjacent issue, the ethics of herbalism, right? Like, I think you're involved in herbal business and there are ethics that show up in clinic and also in business that would be great to discuss. Welcome back.
Thanks, Steph. Really, yeah, it's been a few wonderful years and lots has happened in both of our lives. It's really interesting. As soon as I was telling you, I've just delegated. I nearly said relinquish, but I should be kinder to myself in terms of how I did it. The CEO role. And as soon as that happened, I stepped back into the founder role with space like this. Your email was there, and I was like, "Oh, it's incredible!" Like, not surprising from yourself in terms of you're the one that went straight into that serendipitous little flow for myself. And yeah, it feels really great to come and have a conversation with you, and probably in a very different space as well from the last time we chatted. So yeah, I'm really interested in just following the convo and seeing where we go, especially around ethics. It's had me stepping out. It's actually made me realize in my business it is one of those areas where I hold a lot in my head, and it's actually prompted me to already start thinking about getting it out and start creating a few little policies around my product universe department.
So what are some of the thoughts around herbal ethics that have been percolating for you since I sent you that email last week?
Well, I've always I'm really fortunate. I really fell ass back into like 10, 11 years ago into my sourcing partners in China. And it was like at the same time I was going to like longevity conferences and was a part of various Facebook groups and attending events that was everyone could see who the people were that were going and interested in like Truth Colkin's teaching of the herbs, and Rod Teagarden and George Lamoureux, so on and so forth. All those people who really brought especially the tonic herbal medicine, Taoist herbal medicine over into the West. And so there was a guy who had made his wealth in China already and got into Taoism, got into herbalism, found out about D-Dao and was like, oh, cool. I want to start restoring like a network of villages, because the D-Dao farming was just going away due to just practicalities of there was no one in the villages left to actually work because there was no work in the there's no way to develop cash. So all the young people go to even the middle-aged people were leaving like the Tremella, Tremella Town, which I just went to in my last trip. It's like you go through these big gates with these big, like tremellas that they've carved out, and it's like and there's like paintings of tremella farmers everywhere, um, and they're like, yeah, this is like only like the past 5 years that they've really had enough of a workforce. The farmer we went to, which I think I went live on Superfeast Instagram in September at that Tremella farm and showed that farmer, and he was just taking us through the fact that he was able to start bringing back Dwan wood, like log grown Tremella now due to the demand. His children were around, and he's able to expand. And so like I really had that person reach out to me because they saw I was starting Superfeast, and I was like experimenting with a few other people who were claiming D down. He reached out to me and was like, look, we're doing this. And I'm like, cool. And, I was like in the beginning, like sourcing from China. I'd never done it before. I was like, I'm going to be telling you about what I need and what I want. And then absolutely got taken to school about what DDAO was, thankfully from someone who had really, again, built your wealth. I really do empathize with people who are trying to create herbal endeavors like this and then hit that area where it's like, oh God, I'm like, I need to survive here. And I need to like, maybe I do need to just, cut a corner here just because the margins are too tight. And it's just like an unreasonable thing to do. It's kind of like it's like, it makes exact sense. It's like a legacy elder thing to go and do some of these, like like, like take on something big like this, like within Chinese herbalism. But I was thankfully one of them, one of the people, that they were like, my dude was like, reached out, hey, to the team. He reached out to me on Facebook, and then literally just built it from there. And then they were like, no, this is how DDAO works. This is how
So
this is
run
how
us
you source. This
through,
is
for people who don't know what DDAO is, and I know that that's a big part of your business philosophy, which is why I thought this would be an interesting conversation for us to have. Run us through what is DDAO.
I mean, it's pretty simple. It's based off the Ben Sao Jing 2,000-year-old, the Divine Farmer's classic of Materia Medica. It's just an old Chinese classic. And as a part of the naming of the herb, one of the characters was the region that it was grown in. Just knowing that back then there's no farming, there's no DDAO farming, so it's just like just note that it's high mountain. This, kind of this general direction, this type of like whatever precipitation, this amount of like frost or whatever it was, and that gives you the most potent Shazandra reishi, so on and so forth. And so it's just kind of the continuation of that into farming, ensuring that you're growing herbs in the area that are endemic. And there's a whole science emerging around it now, just really trying to test that, like I call like the galaxy of constituents, to ensure that it's gone through an appropriate amount of stress, picked at an appropriate time, that it's just like, and again, really practically, you can, when we're extracting our own herbs, you can see when, some herbs need a little bit of extra time in the teapot versus some that need like real high temperature, those that need a little bit less, that need a little bit of extra pressure through time. We use pressure through vat as but so on and so forth. That's like that leads to an extraction that you're like, yep, that's just a good, the word full spectrum is another, ethically, that's a good one to put out there because it hasn't even got like a real solid definition. But just creating a really robust herb that is extracted in a manner, a comprehensive enough manner that you get those benefits that have that are maybe they're a little bit more in law, like in the Ben Sao Jing, and there's more clinical ways to describe it now. Like long-term usage will lead to lightness and like an opening of the heart and greater resistance to premature aging. They're the benefits that are listed in the Ben Sao Jing, as well as some more specific ones. So
So
it's just doing it in that manner. There's a lot of other ethics that come around DDAO. I was just talking to another DDAO, another person in Australia who sources DDAO, and he said he was talking to us like a mate of his who also knew exactly what DDAO was, but it was like there's no point in even mentioning it because there's no way to regulate it. There's no like organic stamp you can get through doing it. And he was like, yeah, what do you think? And I was like, well, no, that's of course they're the invisible paths are the most rewarding ones. They're very, it's DDAO for me is not very rewarding in broad marketing, very rewarding in marketing for the people who like listen to this, but it's like that's not what matters. You got to uphold these, it needs to be like, quite well away from like industry, in the sense that there's no like huge amount of like environmental toxicity, and that needs to be tested for. And there, you can't bring in synthetic fertilizers, and you can't be leaving the environment worse than when you found it. The reishi farmers need to rotate rotate every 2 years the little area that they're growing their
Mm-hmm.
reishi. It's not very economical. There's
So
only
all
spring
of
water or
that
well water. Yeah.
is incorporated in DDAO. So from what I
Mhm.
understand, the DDAO originated as a kind of that an indication that a plant was harvested in the right location at the right time of year, etc. And we do see that appearing very in scatterings throughout some of the old European texts. Like meadowsweet should be harvested at this time of the moon, at this time of the year. And I assume that maps across to peak, chemical activity for what we want. And now as Chinese medicine has moved into a largely cultivated materia medica, that DDAO speaks about kind of appropriate, ethical, and well-skilled cultivation and harvesting, right?
Mm. Yeah, and there's definitely like, as you can imagine, again, it is coming up more and more that you'll see, because it's grown in a particular province. They're like, well, it was only stated in the Bensao Jing that province was where you need to grow it in order for it to be DDAO. So we'll grow it down here on a low-lying land with lots of
Mm.
humidity, and that's kind of popping up a lot. Whereas there is a lot of there's a lot of work that's been done and really somewhat formally locked in. There is a book that's probably the best collection of the exact conditions, including now, like, there's a lot of, as it's like just the best. It's like, cool, people are like, oh yeah, I'm D-Dow, I'm the best, but there's like rules of how long your spore or seed has been circulated, in terms of like collecting wild spores and wild seeds and that
Mm.
kind of thing as well. And the biggest one I was talking about with this guy at the herbal symposium last weekend was he was like, we went and visited this shiitake farm, and there was like trash like going through all of the they're a DDAO farm, and there's trash going through the little creek. And he's like, I just didn't know, like, what it was like it's a real angsty kind of path to follow, this one, and like, he's like, well, what do you say? Is that DDAO? And it was just like, nah. And it's like, and it's just like, it's not. And that's like, those are the little side things that are, I've kind of talked to my people recently, and I'm like, this is why I go to China, and this is why we do like drone flies over the farms, and I go live, and I'm going through there, and people are like, well, what's that over there? What's that over there? I don't know if I like that. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Mm.
Like, I just came from the a naturopathic and herbal symposium, and you look around the lay of the land, and everyone's just really gone left brain, and some good forcing, but I didn't see, not one other person had a picture of the like really in-depth pictures of farms, or the farm. When I met Ron Teagarden for the first time, when I just started Superfeast, and I was going down this line, and I'd started sourcing DDAO, and I was like, just already getting like, oh, it's from China, oh, it's not organic, and all the kind of stuff. But that was like a smidge, that's like, because I had all the receipts otherwise. And Ron, who has Dragon Herbs, who he essentially was the one that got me onto DDAO and that path. And he was just like, in his big grizzly bear voice, was just like, listen, like, if you can feel it, and what it is when we say DDAO, Dao D, there's two ways that they say it. Like, if you can feel it, you have to follow it. Like, you will not be satisfied if you don't.
Mm.
And
I think you brought up something really important there, which is that, if you're running a herbal business, or even if you're stocking herbal products for your clients, like at whatever scale that is, when we make purchasing decisions, we are encouraging certain kinds of herbal manufacturing and herbal cultivation, growing, harvesting. And when we're starting a herbal business, there's a tension between, I think, most people who want to go into that kind of line of work, in listening to this podcast anyway, people who are like, oh, I love plants, I want to make a business with plants. There would be that desire to be using herbs and herbal products that are ethically, sustainably harvested, support local communities. I know it's a thing that in Eastern Europe, a lot of the Western herbs are grown in Eastern Europe or wild harvested, and they're not available to local people anymore because they're being sent all over the world for the herb craze, right? So there's an impact that our herb choices have on local communities and environments, and also on the bioactivity of the herbs that we're using, right? And there's a tension between wanting to do right there, and I would say DDAO is, a way to say to do right by the plant and the community and the environment, and then the very real need for the thing you dedicate most of your time to, providing enough of an income to look after yourself and your family. Yeah. And I started a herbal business that I don't have anymore. I started that about, I don't know, 15 years ago, just making products for Happy High Herbs, mainly teas and tea blends. And the way that the margin on those products changed over 10 years was insane. Like the increasing cost of herbs to buy basically meant that unless you're very niche or have really found, if you're a brilliant business person, making a business that is going to support you through making herbal products is very difficult. And so there's a pressure point between wanting to do right and wanting to survive as a business. And as the cost of living gets higher, that gets harder. I think it's where our ethics get jammed between that place, right?
Well, I really like that conversation, and I'm aware that it's at some point we'll need to land this in like hyper practical things. And I'm just like, I'm just reminding everyone as well, like there are like resources when you are talking about even just like the availability of a herb. So in saying that, in terms of like the positive initiatives, I actually didn't even realize I didn't think I'd be talking about this, but I'll try and maybe tinker in the background afterwards and bring up the national initiatives around the sustainability of the herbs. It's because it was actually really interesting the way they were going about it, and it's very much they've got a national scheme, but then there's the province. It's incredible that there's like just like the states in Australia, for instance, like New South Wales has got an atrocious record for protecting its like national park and so on and so forth. And some provinces have real atrocious management of one recently, actually the most recent one. So with Poria, right, Fuling. Oh, I can't remember where what the name of that province was. I'm having a bad memory day. But the province we were connected with farmers in, it was about 5 years ago that it hit a point where there was like whoever's in charge, whichever immortal is in charge with the branding of Fuling over the last like 7 years has like stepped up, and all of a sudden it's like having its day again, which is really cool. It was like not very popular in trendy herbal medicine, Western herbal medicine. Even at the NHAA over the weekend, there was like Poria, Poria was like front and center, like with
Wow, that's
tremella and reishi
surprising.
with a lot of the pictures. I was like, it's cool. What was that?
That's surprising, I think, Yeah, that's another. Finish your thought, and then I want to talk about fashions and trends in herbalism and how they intersect with ethics, because that's
Great,
huge.
great conversation. So anyway, it's now in Yangon, but the province we were in, the local government was falling really far behind or refusing. Like it had a real like we don't give a shit kind of thing, which is surprising considering you'd think that there would just be a national with a scheme. You'd think that there would be a province based like uniformity, like yes, yes, chairman. But there's an array of approaches, and this province was refusing to regulate the amount of pine trees that were being wild harvested for these poria farms that were popping up. And so there was actually there's the community of people who are sourcing DDAO is pretty small, and so there was a little bit of like a coalition around like it's and including with some of the farmers, and so it's like, right, we're all agreeing like Yunnan is actually getting to the point where they will come and um, they'll come and show us where you harvested the pine. They fly choppers over the
Wow.
area, so on and so forth. And so um, that's a thing you like, in terms of like actual like regulation and where it's coming from. There can be an excessive regulation, but like obviously there's real great initiatives for regulation. So that was one that we did 4 years ago, and no, longer than 4 years ago, because when I was in 2018, they'd been set up for like a year in the new Yunnan area. But and he was like, he just happened to be a person, not for better or worse. Like like we need people to expand and be like, there's demand, we need to expand and demand, and we're going to justify it because we need to get this herbal medicine to the people. This
Mm.
farmer was just like, no, it was just really nice for my family to like be in a place where it's like, it's all very ethical, we're all very happy. Likewise, the premium comes with you, and that's the part of DDAO I really like. Again, it's very practical. This is like, it can seem very, for people listening, it's like, wow, is this like this magical like web? And yeah, of course, the world is a magical web, and especially when there's a lineage. But there is a practicality. Like, we know that in a few years' time, when that government in the middle of China, or that province, when they get come down on by the government for not regulating, all of a sudden maybe they'll have an excessive reaction, and
Mm.
that industry. So it's also very practical and like commercially
Of course, yeah.
driven in that
Well,
manner, just so everyone's on that page. But
what
yeah,
I'm
that's an example of
hearing,
things we're doing.
what you're saying there, when I listen to you, I think, like, of course, I have had concerns around contamination and unethical production when I buy Chinese medicine and Chinese herbs because of my assumptions and prejudices against China, which are, I've never gone to China to test them to see if they're real. So I love that you, as a wholesaler and a retailer of Chinese herbal medicine, have the fact that you have multiple times gone to China, to farms, and actually feet on ground, hands on heart, eye contact with farmers, checked out what people are doing. The certification doesn't matter so much to me. Like, I trust that. And actually, I do think that there is an ethical imperative, if it's possible, for people who are selling herbs to visit the places that the herbs come from, because that is the only way to know. And that's the only way that you can judge genuinely, truly, that you can feel with that heart sense whether that plant and that place and those people, whether it's right to be doing that. And we do want to succeed in business. We do need to provide for our families, but success is not only financial. We must also measure success by the way that, that feeling sense, and also, or by certain measures such as sustainability and ethical harvesting and impact on, lower socioeconomic countries, right? There's a power imbalance there. So I do think that if you are in the business of herbal medicine as a producer, that it is incumbent upon you to, when you can and how you can, make those assays yourself.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about business, when I was the direction I was about to go in before I said, look, don't worry, everyone, we'll get practical with like there's sites, there's the United Plant Savers, there's IUCN Red List, but also it's very nice for everyone to be like, hey, where is that chaga on the red list? Is it like under, or what about rhodiola? Is that actually like, dendrobium on the sites is banned, right? So you actually won't be able to, like, if you get pulled up sending dendrobium across borders, that's on the species, and
In
so you won't be
China.
able to. Yeah,
Yeah.
even though I was doing cultivated dendrobium, the way that to go down the route to on every shipment that dendrobium was not wild and so on and so forth, it was
Yeah.
just causing too
And
many
good on the
headaches.
Chinese government for having any kind of checks and balances on that, right? Because a lot of countries don't at all. And I know that Damiana in Mexico, that is one, well, according to Mountain Rose Herbs, which is a really beautiful herb supplier in the States, I read they did a whole visit to Damiana farmers in Mexico, and I was reading what they discovered, and they discovered actually that every year the government has a consultation with elders from the rural and indigenous communities around how the plants are looking, and they set an annual export limit based on that conversation. And I love that. That's amazing. Lots of places aren't doing that.
There are lots of places not doing that. Like, I have similarly have a prejudice against certain places, and like, obviously not doing that in like, there's a certain provinces in India that I have that, well, that I can't trust it. And it's like, but I actually haven't thought to like ask people in the industry, are there any initiatives like this? The same with China. People are like gobsmacked that China has any type of regulation, in say like, the trade of wild ginseng, and exactly the, allowing shaga is a perfect one. Like, there are now hardcore quotas that are placed upon wild shaga harvested in Changbai, and those who have proven, like a couple at least, ideally more generations of been out there harvesting the shaga, like one of our Mr. Lee's, like our primary shaga harvester dude, very funny guy, whacks his long neck of beer in the back at 9 a.m. when he goes out, and off he goes. It's like that's his one of his herbal paths. But he got it from his father. His son is starting to harvest. He's got a higher quota. And so when they put that in, they were like, right, we know we're going to cut some of your, there's a lot of people jumping in and submitting for these licenses. So then they gave him first access to a greater amount of pine nut harvesting.
I love
But
that.
like, yeah, it's like that is happening. But like, I agree. Like, I would never know what was going on in certain parts of India or Europe or Mexico. So I just think, even I'm talking to myself here for everyone listening, like, start, if you've got that suspicion, start with going and just like trying to find out somehow what a local, what a more local or provincial or state government is actually has in place in the area before just being like, yeah, shaga. Like, I've heard there's people losing their noodle over shaga harvesting, mostly in North America, because North America just then they've just had none. They have barely any regulation. Then they've just gone bang and over. Like, I've had a friend have his entire business wiped out because they're just like, no more harvesting chaga. And so it's like, that's way less, with way less grace than the way it's been approached, say, in
Mm.
like the north of China. I don't even know how it's been approached in Siberia, to be honest. I
I
just know
guess
that it's not on the red list.
the thing that China would have going for it is that there's a long tradition of people who are herb harvesters and herb gatherers, and they respect their own traditions, in China to some
Very true.
extent.
Very true.
And of course, even without regulation, I think in a situation where you have multi-generational herb farmers or herb gatherers, then there would be their own system of ethics that has arisen from being in relationship with the land and those plants. And that's just what happens when we are on the ground. Most people, when we're faced directly with the consequences of our action, we make right choices. Only when the consequences of our action are so invisible to us, like me choosing to have chaga every day when maybe I don't need to, that does have an impact on communities and land very, very far away that I can't see. And so that's very hard to make good ethical choices. And that's another thing in the herbal ethics. As we have delocalized herbal medicine practice and consumption and harvest, we create that distance that allows us to have no idea what's happening, to have no idea of the impact of our decisions, and therefore generally, even when we know, there's studies that show, even if you know intellectually that something you're doing has a bad impact somewhere far away on someone you've never met, it's much harder to make the ethical choice. When it's in your face, we nearly always make the ethical choice, unless you're mentally ill or psychopathic or something, right? We want to do the right thing, essentially.
Yeah, sometimes it's like, but I've got 4 kids and I've got, got to go to school and I've got to do all this every day. It's like, where it's a big, we've had such a population explosion and such industrialization and, such a huge medical system emerged to try and catch that and, like loosely support that. And then you've got these herbal traditions or acupuncture or ayurveda or yoga and qigong trying to like catch up and feel those, like just like all this, like these herbal traditions trying to pop up and, close these gaps. But then the gap is so huge,
Mm.
like, is like, it's like, I really love this kind of conversation. There is literally no answer because we're just in the middle of a big unfolding of how to keep a finger on the pulse of what is ethical, what is justified. I kind of like always used to start my talks with like, let's just like really get real. We're talking about powders in jars from China here. The reason I've picked it is it's the best I can do.
Mm.
I think in business, like that's something a lot of businesses become obsessed with the product. Not to say that I'm like hands up, like I have to be very grateful to like Reishi and Lion's Mane for them, having their explosions and want to be, whoever the immortal is in charge of their PR. It's been very beneficial for me to like catch that wave and, likewise through it introduce the, the Jing herbs and the Qi herbs and the Shen herbs. And but nonetheless, it's like, for me, blood flow is product flow and chi flow is cash flow. And I'm got to be very grateful to those. But like, I think if you're a product obsessed business is where it kind of gets the stickiest with when it comes to the long-term expression of a herb company ethically. So you can't be a perpetual growth or a perpetual, kind of profit driven company. Not that that's really good long-term anyway for a company to be, just focusing on that side of things. It's like, or for a legacy company, if you want to just like rip and tear and sell to VCs, sure, that's fine. But
Is it fine?
um
I don't know. I'm just
it's fine. I just try and feel like you guys doing your thing, whatever. Yeah,
Well, I think so. I notice a beautiful design not to judge in this conversation. And yet, when we're talking about ethics in herbalism, there has to be an aspect of judgment, of like discernment, right? Which is the kind of polite cousin of judgment. And there has to be in an inside any industry, if there is no mutual holding to account, then then what happens, right? So inside this kind of conversation, I think we need to be, what is ethical herbalism? How do we do our best to be ethical, and how do we support each other to keep moving towards a higher state of ethics and alignment? And some of that involves a kind of benign judgment, right? And so saying that actually, if you're growing a company based on herbalism and your aim is to grow as fast as you can profit wise and sell to a VC, then inevitably inside that kind of trajectory, you will need to be making decisions that compromise some of the things that we've been talking about, you know?
I think why I say fine, because there's I'm surrounded by a few of them, and I'm sure a few people might think of me in that way, maybe rightfully or wrongfully, but I really do welcome the judgment. I'm kind of the person that sits in the shower and comes up with arguments against myself in terms of what I'm doing, and am I justifying, am I gathering evidence for something, have I really thought about something, have I looked, so like I it's why, but I really welcome those conversations. And some of the time the biggest pivots I've had is I was like, no, I'm doing good, and I've like justified it really well, and then I've come up against like some really good judgment, and either expose something where I'm like, actually, I'm really proud of this. I didn't even realize how well I was doing. Or, sometimes like I really am like blowing smoke up my own ass, or I'm like deluding myself. So I'm with you on that. I think where I say fine is because I'm like, especially at the moment, surrounded by a couple of these companies. And I guess for the longevity of myself in business, I've had to just like also accept, which I know you're not implying that not do that either. But the reason I say it is fine, because it's just like, for me, it's a really good, like, not idealistic practice of just realizing it's gonna happen, mate. Like, like mushrooms became cool. In 2015, there was a really great crop. Like all my other colleagues, maybe bar one, but I didn't, we were all like working synergistically together. I was so proud, especially of the Australian market. There was like, it was just incredible. And then I really watched my I I don't like I honest to God, like I do not care about the competition primarily anyway. I don't feel like I don't get affected by having my business taken away from me. I probably should feel it a little bit more in terms of just being responsible for like my team and so on and so forth. And whether this is actually real, I think it's genuine, or whether it's my survival tech, like, I really I get really venomous when these, that if someone's coming at it from that VC direction, the corners that were cut. Therefore, the non-specificity of their decoction and then their delivery of expectations to people. The customer service. I mean, like I just recently was like, all right, for a couple of people on the team, like, I just want to know the lay of the land of what's going on with these, like, these other colleagues and competitors of ours. And I was like, "Oh, whatever, all right, do it." And I was just like blown away that they were doing a little bit of like, hey, what do I do if this happens and this happens, I want to pick this, just like that. They were like, either would get ignored. These are big companies, these are big venture capitalist owned companies, and or like and then just like like you're working with herbal medicine, and you have the GM just sends you a couple of like FAQs, a chat GPT,
Mm-hmm.
generic chat GPT response, quite often just ignored. One of the companies who I really respected, like, and I respect the founder still, but just didn't respond. And I was just like how, like, in my, that's like, let alone there's that. And then when there's like, there are people out there, as who are like, I don't know why I feel like I need reishi. That person either has something maybe invisible going on, or very apparent going on, and there are a lot of people, sometimes under the guidance of practitioners, sometimes not, who are dealing with very hairy conditions, and they sometimes when they shouldn't be, sometimes when they should be, whatever, like go and do their research or follow a thread and go and, like, say, take a mushroom or take a herb, and they have which is their sovereign right. They're going to have a go at it
Mm-hmm.
themselves, and it's the responsibility of the companies and the community to increase the IQ of the general population in terms of how to engage with herbs, which is another big thing around ethics, is how we hold that process of the the restoration of that, which that's what gets me is like, if you're going to be engaged in like throwing mushrooms and adaptogens out there, you better be able to back it with someone if they can call you and you will hold them, or you will like, at least be able to tell them, no, you've crossed the line between now, like you need to be going to a practitioner, and so on and so forth. So there's that side of things. But when that person does have a go at it, and goes and like says, I think reishi might be good, and they go and get a reishi that it hasn't been decocted traditionally, or it's been decocted in a way that is, beautifully reductionist in trying to find a particular activation of, like a double dendritic activation rather than a single one. Therefore, it has, a more stimulating immune effect. Therefore, it has this impact on particular, like
Autoimmune conditions.
autoimmune tumors, so on and so forth. But they haven't specified that you've taken away the harmonizing effects when you've gone into, more of a directed clinical, where they're just like, no, we do this and we do this, therefore we're the best. Or even worse, what's going on at the moment in Australia is there's like TGA products. They were like, all we have to do is put 20% of a traditional, a therapeutically decocted mushroom, and the rest will pack out with whole ground mushroom. And I really like the competition if it's transparent, but then the amount of work that we do are like, these are different products, it's okay, put us side by side, but let's make sure that we're aware of the difference of these two.
Mm.
And the amount of people who are like, I had no idea. And it's like, that gets under my skin, because that person who has autoimmunity and is going, I'm going to engage with this. And then they give it a crack and they don't get that therapeutic benefit. They don't have they know they're going for a reishi because it's famous for these reasons. And we know empirically now that a decoction in this range is what gives that fame and these general benefits. And then to just piggyback in and just go and like pluck all of those and harvest all of those people. It's pure capitalism. It's pure, part of me kind of like loves the challenge, and I have to in order to survive this. Otherwise I become too much of a bleeding heart who feels sorry for himself. Well, yeah, I also was like, right, I do enough due diligence, and it's amazing, especially now where I'm like, cool, I'm really do want to maybe learn a little bit more of the nuance of formulating around this. This was, however, I had thought about, say, like the Jing formula is like, does not have an envoy for a very particular intention, and but and then at the same time going and getting dragged into that conversation, I realized, well, I don't have to formulate that way. Same as like the four things formula. It's got a very particular intent of, when people are so Jing deficient, having an envoy actually takes away the ultimate intent. And so, I was like, okay, but I came out of that going, you know what, I really should, when I get to a point where I actually have supply chain capacity, we'd offer a couple of Jing products, maybe a yin Jing, a yang Jing, and then get some envoys in there and get a little bit more specific. So that is actually a really big deficiency in Superfeast. We don't have that training capacity. It's like always too hard, and we rely on someone like Nick who can get it. Came from the warehouse, and he's like our sole rep. Who kind of gets it because he gets the macro of it, and going like, right, no, this is a beautiful alchemical opportunity. We've been exposed in the sense of where, what if we then have both in 2 years' time? What if we do really slowly find our people, slowly develop our training programs, and then also get enough products in the line to really justify it and really, plug a few gaps in terms of like a, nourishing blend, and, like a bone blend, and maybe a couple of like, get into the substantias, and, we bring astragalus back, and so on and so forth. So there's
I just want to make a request, if you have perimenopausal blends, that you do a couple of variations, because there's people who have a lot of heat and fire in coming up, and a lot of people have a lot of deficiency, so
I should well, I had a menopause blend ready to go 4 years ago, and we've all agreed, well, we can't, because we don't have the dual approach. The kind of solution I came to recently, I was like, oh man, I've really kind of mucked up in not releasing that, because it's like one of the questions we've got for a long time, but I wouldn't, because we didn't have any, like, especially liver gallbladder dredging herbs, like formulas. So we've just recently gone like, right, if we do have like as general as possible, but in that kind of 50% of like women who don't have that excess heat, but have like a big warning on there, and then like come out with it. So like I kind of got off it. But anyway, I love that you said that, because that's one thing that is a bugbear of mine, that, and I'm also really proud. That's like, no offense to like, yeah, like that's easy cash for us. Like that is cash in the fucking bag. Like so easy. And
Absolutely.
but we just didn't have the capacity to land in, like, I finally have someone in the product universe with me, and like, all right, if we do start with this formula first, we get really specific about who it's for, who it's not for, and we go in that direction where like the farthest we've gone on a label to deter as well as like get people really clear. Menopause was the only real, that's the only real like
Well, I
stage of
think that's an
life.
interesting question in ethics with business as well. I think, and or in the herbalism world, is that if you release a product that's called the eczema blend or the menopause blend, people buy it because people like to self-diagnose, and it is promising a solution to a problem that they know that they have, right? And so something that I enjoy about Superfeast is that they haven't gone down that line. Even when I was making tea blends, I was calling the like calm blend and the uplifting blend. They were describing what they were going to do, but that's not entirely true to form in herbalism, because the medicine and the response is an interaction between the product and the person. I'd also add spirit and place, etc. But let's just keep it the product and the person. The inner ecology of that person meeting the energetics of those plants or that plant creates a particular response, and it's not always predictable unless you have a read on what's happening for them, right? So menopause is a great example that a lot of women have a very hot excess heat and fire that they need releasing, but a lot of women in that time, they might feel hot, but they're fundamentally exhausted, depleted, and cold. And so you can cause injury to those people. And that when we've moved towards herbalism in the West being very, Herb X or product X is for Y, Reishi's for anxiety, and so many ways you could describe that, right? Damiana's for depression, etc. Rhodiola's for fatigue. Well, sometimes rhodiola's the wrong herb for fatigue because it's very
100.
stimulating. There's an ethical problem in prescription and in description, a description problem with plants that's unethical. And it's so tempting as a business to just provide a product that promises a solution to something someone knows that they have and they will then buy.
I found that probably like Sleep Blend was the other one that someone, like, it was probably, oh gosh, when did we start getting distributed? Like 9 years ago. They were like, right, I want to see like a sleep blend. I want to see like an energy blend. I was like, oh, yeah, energy's funny. Like, we've got Jing will, like the TGA kind of makes it tricky in terms of like when you list in terms of what claims you can make and can't make. Thankfully, there is Chinese medicine claims. So
Awesome.
we're able to stay within that realm. And now I've got like a my future sister-in-law who's a naturopath. Then I've got my future org chart having a Chinese herbalist in house
Mm-hmm.
as well. Like,
Like the fact that you're marketing your products as Chinese medicine concepts that are more replicable, and also that people don't have an instant idea of what that's going to do for them, I think is really ethical. So thank you. And to put those
oh, and
caveats on
like
the
and
reviews is great. But let's move away from
yeah,
ethics
yeah.
in business. And I'm really curious. You were recently at the National Herbalist and Naturopaths Association and a conference, and I'd love to know, as an observer sitting there with a bunch of practitioners, what did you see as the ethical issues or themes or concerns that were emerging in that NHAA conference?
The most blinding black and white ethical issue is the movement for the compounding of specific formulas going off-site, going into like a distributor dispensary where it can
Mm,
just be ordered online and then then ordered. So there's no herbs actually in clinic with practitioners. So that's something that's really just getting released now. And don't get me wrong, in one, I understand there will be settings where I can only have like 20. I've got hard cash flow issues. I'm like, like if I can only have 20 products on, and so if I have to go outside of that, it's really beneficial for like
mm,
a practitioner to be like, oh, I know this is the herb, and I know, and so I'm going to order this for you. Like, I love it as an idea as an entrepreneur. And there was a couple of like really cool new ways of doing that. Some people are doing like real tiny pressed pellet capsules, and
cool.
that's how they were doing their compounding, and it looks all cool because they're all different colors and stuff, and it's like all very sexy. And then there's just the classic tincture compounding. And so, as it always is the way, I've like stumbled across the few people who are inside the industry, and I'm just like, oh, what's going on with that? And just they happen to have like the hour conversations with me, and they give me their download of like, oh my god, yeah, well, I'm the rep for this tincture company, and I'm going around and I'm seeing that they're like, they won't even have like 3 herb, bottles anymore, like on hand. And then
Mm.
I come back to them and they're like, oh, my results are really going down. And they're like, why? And it's just like, oh, I've just had a hard time really, blah, blah, blah. No
And so,
connection to the herbs. No, lack, just completely not realizing where they're getting concerned that they don't have the herbs on hand. They're not interacting with the herbs.
mhm.
Meanwhile, in naturopathic university degrees, there's all of this concern about allowing the students to test herbs. I'm sure many of the teachers are incredible, and encouraging the students to do it. So I'm not saying majority of them, but like if there is a complaint from some of the students that yeah, we don't even really do a lot of work directly with the herbs,
Mhm.
taking the herbs. It's up to us to go and do that.
That's why they should study with me.
Yeah, like that is well, yeah, and you're like you'd be. I'm sure you've experienced it. If not the primary teacher, like for those that come out like the rehab or the reawakening. It happens in
Absolutely.
Chinese medicine with studying the classics as well.
Yeah.
I find that really, it's something. Again, it's like I can really feel in the back of my throat that makes me sick is something that is accepted in terms of institution. That's where I can
Mm.
feel like, rather than me keep that, I'll spit venom at that aspect of that institution. And at the same time, lock arms with that institution and pat them on the back
Yeah,
for
I mean,
the
it's interesting what
amazing things they're doing as well.
it's amazing that that service exists for practitioners. I think when I started working in clinic, that didn't exist. That you could just have an account with. I know one of the businesses that one of my students has just started working at actually is the Natural Chemist, I think, and the owners are chemists primarily, and they've created a section of their business which is tincture formulation for practitioners to order, and it gets posted straight to their clients. Now that's so appealing. I'm in clinic 1 day a week, and I have lost, I don't know, over the course of my career of like 7 years in clinic, I've probably lost like $20,000 worth of money on my dispensary because I love to have a complete dispensary and they go out of date. Or I have a client that comes in and that client really, I'm like, oh, you're really going to need chase trees. I'm going to order chase tree in and I never see them again. And so then I have a bottle of chase tree that is a very specific medicine. I don't work a lot with fertility and it just sits there and doesn't get used. There's an ethical issue in that as well, because then there's a disrespect to the plants and the medicine and the amount of plant that's required to make that. As running a small business clinic, like you can't. It's a big hit. I have to be able to taste and touch and smell the medicines, and part of how I formulate is I taste the formula as I go along, and I feel into whether it feels right for that person. But I can understand why people are really excited about the opportunity to not have to have a dispensary on hand.
Well, yeah, and then it's like, okay, well, what standards do we set? If it is a herb, that you chasteberry is one that you would hope that as a practitioner you would be like have taken the opportunity at some point just to spend a week just getting a sense of and getting a feel of and taking some notes, and maybe that becomes like a bare minimum standard, in terms of like you were talking about judgment of like the VCs, a nice healthy amount of like judgment from those that have a bit more weathered in along the path to be like, come on, like you really can't just theoretically prescribe a herb. That's it's actually really like a real poor, like, yeah, poor form by you, like that's like, okay, maybe a little bit of that from the community. However, that was just the beginning of it. The level of like talking to some people, the extent of like categorizing the rationale, like the taxonomy, the pharmacology, the constituent based relating to herbs was just off the charts.
Hmm.
It was just like so primary. And every time the conversation would, maybe talk about like an, archetypical, is there like, like conversation around a particular herb or, just something about like, I don't know, I find myself just sometimes assuming like, find this herb why do you think pori is coming about at the moment? Do you think people are like dreaming about it, or do you think like, like what, I'm trying to like, they're like, well, I don't know. It's just like probably like some study was done, and it's like people realize that it's a diuretic as well as like doing this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, there's no other, like the deficiency of
soul connection to the plant
yeah,
path.
it's honestly, I was, and also like the way it was explained to me is it's like the degree starts there. Well, it's naturopathy now, not herbalism necessarily, but like in their herbalism courses, but like in it starts there and ends in you got to always understand why. You always got to be able to explain the exact reason rather than like coming into like a holism, like left and right, perception and rationale. What happens when perception and rationale kind of like combine? Like what's the actual process? Even like like and don't get me wrong. And then like as I kind of went along and talked to a few people, of course there are those people who are leading with that relational side of herbalism and like trying to get that kind of like that
So I'm,
unified
I'm
aspect.
curious
But
why you think, why do you think that's an ethical issue? That that herbalists and naturopaths practitioners out there are prescribing herbs from that very clinical perspective without ever tasting the herbs, and obviously not all of them are. Like that's a growing trend. You've raised that as an ethical dilemma. Why?
well, ethical in say maybe a non-urgent manner. Say if it's like if I say it's an ethical, it's like if you're involved in herbalism and um, naturopathy, and likewise, I would say it is the same ethical issue if someone enters into herbalism in a decentralized manner and is operating over a pure intuitive
Mm.
soul connection, metaphysical relating to herbalism with zero analysis for compartmentalizing the things that you do perceive. I would also put that down as a gentle ethical issue, but ethics maybe isn't the word there necessarily. It's like, and whatever it is, people can get a sense. It's like we're going through this like, and I really feel like we're in exactly where we need to be. Whether it's in like Chinese medicine got like self colonized in the feast to such a huge extent that there is very very little of the five element capacity to perceive the fire and the water to be able to really like break down the way that we're sensing where the core blockage of chi transformation is through that very very initial layer
Mm.
of sensing and metaphor. However, at the same time, same with herbalism, same with Chinese medicine, I think we're in exactly where we need to be, that it needed to explode into a left brain space in order to just spread it out far and wide. And now it's going through that reintegration, and maybe it'll go too far again, hopefully not, and come back into like an appropriate
Yeah.
analytical
We
or
need to bring some balance
categorization.
into the way that we're engaging with herbalism. We've gone
Yeah.
so science, now we need to go a bit more soul, and then hopefully we'll find that midpoint. Yeah.
Well, it's also very exciting. I mean, and like, yeah, I mean, like unethical, whatever. Like, that's like, I do feel like it is because it's not effective. Like what they're doing
Mm.
at the moment, there are a lot of herbalists, and I get very, very tired of this. And likewise, people would say the same of like my approach to herbalism is sometimes not effective because sometimes it's like, yeah, that's not where, where scallywag superior herbalism cultivating yourself. That's where we live. So you've ventured in trying to make us primary treatment
Mm.
when we're just there to be an adjunct, and we do our best to really like wave that from the rooftops. But like at the end of the day, there's only so much screaming and and refining you can do. But we will get there. We will reintegrate, and we'll start. And those grey lines will be like will come into clarity. But that integrative approach, if you are with AI coming in, I think we've talked a little bit about this. Like with AI coming in, I'm really looking forward to these herbalists and some of the beautiful conversations I had with like mushroom scientists and scientists in general, like really digging into constituency, really drawing these, like just going in these directions. Like they're like you could watch them like light up and they were frothing and then I'm like, okay, cool. But what happens? Soon AI is going to catch up to this reductionism. Soon you're going to be plugging in symptoms. You're going to be plugging in all the test results. And AI is going to be so much bloody better than you at diagnosing what these herbs are. Your bot is going to talk to the bot within the dispensary. It's going to exactly go and it's going to know exactly where all the classics or where the modern
Mhm.
science says how long the protocol is. And then automatically book you in for another video call. It's not even going to be the practitioner there. You're going to do a video download, the AI, so on and so forth. To be honest, I'm a little excited for that for some reason. There's an efficiency there because it puts the onus back on the human to do what only the human can do. And that is probably like the greatest, so that's when I say ethical in terms of like not having that, very real, as we know, that soul connection or that heart perception, not having that practice grain in like really like drummed into you when you go through like a degree, which you would trust that was something that you would learn because it's just such an practical skill. It's so there and it's so backed by their beloved science now that yet you're
Totally.
still not putting that in there. Okay, fine. That's why you exist. And that's why, which is like a treasure for everyone coming out of that degree. And yourself and the other beautiful people around the world who are like,
Mm.
no, we're going to hold this place and it will be a place where people are able to just be like, no, I don't really need to worry too much because I've got a really beautiful, comfy institution, profession over here, and we've got our ways and we've got our procedures. But AI is going to disrupt the shit out of that.
Yeah,
And then
if the way that you're doing herbal medicine is data driven, then AI will replace you. So there has to be, whereas AI doesn't have a heart, it can't do heart sensing, it can't have insight into a particular, what is like the information I have about this and how is the, what I'm feeling from this person and what can I see in the way that they're speaking, and combining all of those into a beautiful pearl of insight into what the transformative key is for them in their health. I can't do that. But if all it is matching, analyzing all of the recent data and research and matching that to the data of their test results, then AI is going to do it better.
But the thing I did find really quite irresponsible in some of the conversations, definitely not all, but, and I really feel for like a lot of the people who are really, they could really feel what, like they felt it before me, they're like, I'm not bringing this up. I'm not bringing anything new to them, like reps, herbalists, people in the marketing, they're like, yeah, gosh, it is such an issue. And I'm like, and yeah, you don't have time. There is a industry, just, you can't stop and, learn this new skill. But what I did find really irresponsible was the oversimplification. I was like, how long do you spend like learning the analysis of herbs and the matching of the answers to their questions and what they said, and okay, that's that symptom, okay, that tells me about this. Like how long did you spend developing that skill? And then they're like, oh yeah, I'll just like, and you're right, like sometimes I do just use my like intuition. And I'm like, and what is that, like, I'm like, cool, I really want to know, because I'd kind of forgotten. It was like the last weekend I was like, oh, I've forgotten how to describe my process of like when I go and I engage, and probably because I've been trying to avoid my body, which is like evident for other reasons. And now I'm getting back there, but like, I'm like, yeah, I was like, I really went through a little bit of my process. I'm like, okay, I'm getting my Stephen Buhner book back out. I'm going to go through his process. I was like, and I thought, I was like, I really would be great to talk to you again and just really go through some of those more practical, a little bit of yin in the yang, a little bit of yang in the yin. There's a little bit of process and compartmentalization
Totally.
in like intuition. And that was the one that really annoyed me the most. It was just like, yeah, well, of course, of course I use a bit of, I'm like, oh yeah, I think actually this, let me go and see. It's like, no, this is a 50-50. It's a bimodal, like, approach to herbalism is the conversation I'm trying to have here. And I know I sound like a bit of a whingy, I'm just a fan of herbalism. I'm not a herbalist. I don't have a clinic, so I don't have the right to really judge. But that's kind of where I feel like I actually don't have I don't actually think these individuals I was talking to are, irresponsible necessarily. But as a whole, that
It's an
really,
issue in the herbal
it's a
industry.
big issue.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, just a bit of intuition, and like I just use it and just get it like, oh my god, what's this feeling? And it's like, no, that's a big skill to cultivate. If you're in clinic, like that, you can't just like shoot from the hip and pew 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 pew. Like I can definitely have a crack. People always ask me to like, oh, can I talk to you about this? And some of the practitioners I met there as well, you could see they'd had it. Just bang, they'd embodied both those two sides, and you watch them walk, and I'm just like, those are the people that have the special sauce. When you see you as practitioners, you feel them, you're like, far out. Like there's just such a like a coolness. They're just so cool and so like powerful in the way that they are. Like there was a few people I've talked to that really like made me like, oh, it's nice to kind of be around a couple of like emerging masters in that space. Again, someone, for me, I'm just a fan. I'm just on the sidelines, which is always a funny position to be in. I'm a fan of like
Mm.
practitioner and herbalist and patient interactions. I'm a fan of acupuncture. I have zero desire to be a practitioner. And so yeah, it was just cool. I just got to go around the circus of that, that group of people, and that's what I came out with.
So I think that we have flagged to have a bigger conversation on your podcast soon about AI and about some of those things in embodiment and herbalism. But I think that something we touched on earlier that's really interesting when we talk about ethics is herbal trends. And I love that before you were talking about, I don't know who the immortal is who's in charge of the Porios PR, because they're really doing good things right now. But I have had an interesting journey of watching trends in herbalism and actually honestly being quite confused about it, right? And I think that why is it that, 2 years ago, most people didn't know what poria was, or even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, no one knew what reishi was in the West, right? And suddenly reishi is the most, one of the, I don't remember how many hundreds of tons a year are being consumed at the moment. Ashwagandha is another one, right?
Ashwagandha is far out. It's having another
Far
day.
out, luckily, the good thing about ashwagandha is that it grows very fast. It grows in terrible conditions. It's almost a bit weedy, right? So I'm glad that out of all the herbs that are really popular, unlike rhodiola, which grows in really remote regions, takes over 4 years to get any kind of, to be ready to harvest, that grows really slowly, that doesn't grow a huge amount of, that's getting kind of very endangered. We have these trends in herbalism, and it's both for the people who are self-prescribing herbs. It's very easy to get caught up in that, and also as a practitioner, because suddenly everyone's talking about it, and even if you don't consciously realize, you think, oh well, it must be amazing since everyone's talking about it. And also when you prescribe something that people want you to prescribe those herbs because they have, oh, everyone's talking about it, it must do something. It's a great placebo. I've definitely seen when I've taken reishi, people through reishi and ashwagandha, both of them in some of my courses, it's so interesting to see people be a lot of people, they're both fairly subtle herbs, and a lot of people having almost no response, and quite a few people having a negative time on ashwagandha because ashwagandha is very heavy. And so some people, that's just gold for them, right? And some
Mm-hmm.
people discovered during that reishi is a real ally for me. And I had kind of been avoiding reishi because I was like, I don't want to just jump on that bandwagon because everybody else is. Since then, I'm like, okay, reishi is a really good friend.
Herb trends, like yeah, at the moment the broy kind of Shilajit, like the kind of e-com, like real quick and dirty e-commerce, buy from Alibaba, set up an Amazon account, like Shilajit, Tonkatali, Sustanch. Like it's amazing because sometimes you watch these Google trends and you just watch them again, like kind of seemingly explode out of nowhere. Ashwagandha has exploded. Lion's mane continues to be one of those ones that
Mm.
I find, and this is and yeah, I think this is a good unpacking opportunity for us, not just me. In this one, quite often I can sometimes find the thread, and that's like my team has now kind of started doing that as well. They'll try and follow the track, back to like Shazandra just exploded on our website recently, and we're like, oh, Huberman, Huberman,
Yeah.
the guy, like he's like, hey guys, science just told us that going outside is good, like wow, it's like yeah, and also power to him.
I love what he's doing. That's often the response that I have as well. I'm like, wow, going outside is, guess what? Turns out that if you eat during the day when we're meant to be awake, you're going to be healthier. And if you sleep at nighttime, science told us it's good. But he is
I
helping a lot of people through a
He is
scientific language reconnect with a more natural and healthful way of life.
up.
I'm curious, what did Huberman say about Shisandra?
I honestly don't even know. My team were just like, holy shit. Huberman just said that it was like good for like sexual energy and good for women and good for sleep. Everything's good for sleep. And it is good for sleep for certain people. Don't get me wrong. I love that about it. It just went bang. And all like it exploded. And so I guess the thing, I was talking to someone recently, like again, like I was like my trainer, and he was like a real holistic trainer, and he was like far out. It was like we really were getting somewhere, and we introduced all these ways of moving the spine, so on and so forth. And then there's all this influx of the next wave of people. Now that it's become popular, they've come in and they've really dumbed it down, and so on
Mm.
and so forth. And I'm like, yeah, I was like, I have that complaint a lot as well, and I've really not like gone good. And also just like accepting that, like, as soon as something gets mass adopted, you need it to be mass adopted in a way that it's going to be like now really accessible to the people who just like you are really inappropriate for, and you haven't been able to evolve to make it like mass accessible. And sure, there are going to be people who are doing it unethically, and you're going to have to become an elder in that, in that industry, and hopefully increase the, the IQ at least, to just make sure that it's not like detrimental to people's health. But at the end of the day, you're not going to see, there's always going to be a same amount of proportion of people who are really like in the lineage or in the path. And you've got a responsibility to an extent. You can give it up or keep on going, but just almost celebrate the mediocrity that emerges in like herbalism. And for me, in herbalism, mushrooms.
Yeah. So what about for all the practitioners listening? When what is it we should be thinking about? When there are herbal trends, for me, the first thing that comes to mind, it's like to question. We are tribal creatures, which means we are influenced by the mass, and that's just the way it is. And so the fact that if you suddenly start thinking that all your clients need poria or lion's mane, you are probably being affected by the mass, and that's okay. But if a herb is popular, it's at a much greater risk of being prescribed when it shouldn't be prescribed and being over harvested and unsustainably managed. So if you're prescribing inside trends, to do your research about sourcing, about, like rhodiola, we probably shouldn't use rhodiola. If you don't really, really understand rhodiola, and rhodiola has a very special source that I love. It's a very powerful herb, but there's a small number of people it's going to be transformative for. But for a lot of people, it's totally unnecessary, or there are other herbs that will do just as well. So do not use rhodiola unless you really understand it. You know that you're prescribing it really well, or that you're prescribed for yourself really well, and that you're not getting wild harvested rhodiola. So when something's popular, we have to do our due diligence to make sure we're not being affected by that wave.
And I think that's like that the energy that's coming from what you're just stating then is like, if that's like for some people listening, that's going to be like, oh, good, that's my safe spot. And, that to go into that place. And maybe, you might also need to like look on the other side of the spark of the fire for the people I'm going to talk to now. There might be a few of you listening, and this is where I am. It's like, that sounds boring and it sounds responsible. It's like going to slow me down. And it's like, it's overwhelming to like have to try and engage with that. It just feels, it's like, this is so against my nature. It's going to slow me down to an extent which just like irritates me. I've got my goals, but my goodness, it's like so rewarding to go through that process. Like, to also a responsibility that if there is a herbal trend going on and you don't have that connection with the herb, to go and do that research to be able to support your clients or your community and understanding, yeah, I get why you're going to it. And sometimes you do just need to get out of the way. The amount of times I've just been like, whatever, you have to have lion's mane. There's no, your favorite biohacker takes it and you love it. And what else is going on, And then and I just so it's going to like work in this way and that way. And that's great. It's a spleen tonic and this kind of like, bit of a yin spleen tonic and so on and so forth. But what else is going on? And then connect another thing and just like, and then you get them engaged in another way. Sometimes you got to, but in terms of the diagnosing, that is a massive issue. And I can't, like, it's a real good red flag for yourself. I have red flags on myself all the time. And I think it's something that's a real good red flag. That if you find yourself kind of like all of a sudden prescribing a herb, or like going like, and actually methylene blue is really good at the moment, and I'm giving it to all of my clients just because like that was one that I saw happening at the NHA. It was like all of a sudden the latest longevity supplement was in everyone's procedure, plans, and that they were giving out to a lot of their a lot of their patients. And I'm like, God, what is that about? You drag reishi off the fad pedestal and you drag it down to where and maybe, you're like, wow, like Sustanch lately has been coming up and up and up and up and up, and people are like, "Oh, can you bring out Sustanch?" And I'm like, and I'm used to be like, "No, no, 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 no," but like I'm like, hang on, I should go and like, really, have a look, and be like,
And you don't want to
is
bring
it
out
going to highlight?
Sustanch because of sustainability issues?
No, no, no. It's honestly, well, thankfully, no. Sustainability of Sustanch is like, that was one of the farms we went to up in Inner Mongolia. There's like zero problem there. Beautiful farm. I should send you the picture of that. But
And maybe it's useful for the people you're talking to who don't want to do that due diligence. Off the top of my head, the ones you need to be really careful of, okay, reishi, fairly okay. It's being wildly harvested. Ashwagandha grows like a weed. It's pretty good. Rhodiola,
Not much reishi is wild harvested anymore. You'd be very, very rare to get a wild reishi.
sure. Yeah, yeah. So then that's kind of, so rhodiola being wild harvested to extinction. Same with
Yeah,
slippery elm.
rhodiola.
Slippery elm.
Schisandra is another one. If it's doing like, it's amazing how many people haven't made the switch from wild Schisandra over to cultivated
Cultivated,
Schisandra.
almost
Slippery elm's a
extinct.
big one, isn't it?
It's
I'm not
huge.
in like rhodiola is a big one. I really and it's such a shame. I love rhodiola. It's one of those ones I'll always go and get like a bit of a real prized, expensive rhodiola when I'm over in China. Just, then they've got all the certificates and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I only had it in one like real, my like Raji Baji nootropic formula just to kind of like have some fun, hectic times. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, 2 years ago, it's like can't justify it. It's funny. It's not even on like the what's it called? The red. It's not even really on the at risk a lot of the
Mm.
time lists, and that's what I was talking about before. Everyone, there's like you can check out like they've got these like at risk to watch. United Plant Savers is one. I don't know, like they seem more like of
Mm.
a conferencey kind of people, but CITES sites is where like international border
Yeah.
regulators, IUCN Red List has it shows you, not solely just with herbs, but like it shows you what substances on that red list. And yeah, there's a few others. Botanic Gardens Conservation International is the threat search. So these are all these resources you've got if you want to kind of like have a look at what's going out there. But you'd be amazed at how
Golden
often
seal. Even
golden seal.
echinacea, you should not buy wild harvested echinacea or golden seal. It should come organically grown. There's quite a bit of echinacea being grown in Tasmania, sustainably and ethically, but it's alluring the kind of wild harvested Native American echinacea, but it's almost disappearing in
Well,
the
that's how like
wild.
American ginseng is like a crazy one that still doesn't have like that red flag on it. Did you say golden seal before?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, golden seal, echinacea. It's and yeah, I mean, again, it's just one of those things that if you do find that if you, as a business owner, this is where things can be really discouraging. You really got to dig down and remember you're not the main character in life sometimes, and realize just because you
Mm.
do something doesn't mean like it's going to like the whole world's going to adopt it. But get down to a source essence of yourself, of your intention, and you're like, right, things will always happen well if I, and then really get some strong armor to realize that as soon as you disengage with doing something, like that's a little immoral, and do some good education about it, like own it. I
Mm.
really feel like that's something that I would just do things and be really quiet about it, and my team would be like, dude, this is a really cool thing to talk about, why
Mm.
we don't do like stock this herb anymore, why we stopped doing wild Shazandra. And this was like 3 years before even the local government around that, especially that Chungbai Mountain again, even I did it. Me and my team there were just like, it's going in that direction. We might as well start being
Yeah.
and we went and developed relationships with 3 of the local villages who were like, yep, we'll go and we'll expand the farms and we'll set them up. And it's like, again, smart, but like it's difficult. But then sure enough, like, bang, someone went and took the position of like wild Shazandra. And you part of you like, damn it, I want to be the wild herb man. And it's like you gotta and also you gotta be like, yeah, cool. That's what's gonna happen. Do your best to like
Yeah.
do a little bit of education. Don't bleed yourself and your resources. Don't become too resigned about that. But yeah, well, there's a matrix. Just remember there's a harmonious matrix. So if you're not harmonious, do your practice. Just figure out what your next steps are in order to bring you back to harmony. And yeah, don't just cut off, especially if something cuts off cash flow for you. Like if you're not going to engage with like a trendy herb, therefore your e-commerce is going to go down. Just like give yourself enough of a pat on the back to go and like at least do a podcast series about it. Write a couple of articles, do a subreddit, contribute to the community, and
Contribute to
give
the
yourself props as
conversation.
well.
But I think that what I'm hearing from you that I love is that we can take ethics very seriously, especially when we talk about sourcing and sustainability. And it is a responsibility that we do have if we're working with plants as practitioners, as herbal business owners, even as herbal consumers, right? Then there's a responsibility to do that. But we don't have to be quote unquote perfect. We just need to be engaging in that conversation, because conversation is how humans are designed to hold standards. Talk to people, call people on things. If you think that they're not doing it well, do it lovingly, right? Contribute to the conversation online, talk to suppliers. And that is how we bring a bit of focus towards ethical practice in harvesting and use of herbs.
Yeah. And the gentle is good. Inviting that conversation is good.
Thanks, Mason.
Thank you. Say hey to Bubba for us.
I will. Yeah. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
That's it for this moon cycle. Thanks for joining me in another layer of this fascinating conversation we are having about the role of the sacred in our lives as herbalists. If you know someone who would love this episode, then send it through to them, as our work strengthening our herbal community through grassroots herbal education starts right here. I'll see you next time the moon is round in the sky, and until then, I wish you good health and many plants.